Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble.com, the home of video double bass lessons online. If you haven't seen the website, you know what you need to do when you finish this lesson. Please go and check that out. So today I'm continuing with my series of real-world gigging tips for double bass players, and I'm looking at everything that I take with me to the gig. So I'm going to show you what's in this tatty old case here. I'm going to talk you through all the little bits and pieces that I need to make sure I can get through the gig without any problems. Let's get stuck into that now. Now I've had this case for about 10 years or so, so it's definitely done well. It's a camera case and you can pick them up quite cheaply, and the good thing about this is it will keep your amplifier safe if you've got a smaller amplifier like me, because you can cut out a space for it in the foam. So this is what I use to carry around my acoustic image amplifier. Now it comes with a really nice soft case, but I find that when I'm throwing it in and out of the car, it gets less damage this way. In fact, you can see on this amplifier here that I bent the corner of it before I got this box, which prompted me to do so, I think. So anyway, this is the stuff that I'm taking with me to a gig. Obviously there's the amp, which is the key thing, but here's a couple of other bits and pieces I'm taking. 2 cables. Don't ever take one cable to a gig if you're a musician that requires cables. It's just, you know, not a good situation. You've always got to have a backup. And the cables that I use, I thought you might be interested in. They're Planet Waves circuit breaker, and they have a mute switch on the actual cable itself, which I find handy on occasions, especially if I'm doubling with bass guitar, because I'll often use just one cable, and then when I'm switching in between songs, I'll just press mute on the bass guitar, pull it out, put the bass guitar down, and plug this straight into the double bass. I mean, it depends how accurate you have to be with setting your volume levels. And if I was using what I wanted 2 separate levels, then I'd use 2 different cables. But in that situation, the mute switch can be really cool. There's also a towel in here, which I find really useful for rubbing the strings down, and I just protect the top of the amplifier when I'm not using it. That's worth having. And what I try to remember and to remind everybody to do is not to use, if you have a hand towel like this to wipe the strings clean, don't use it in the areas that have rosin. You should have another towel that's only for rosin that you wipe away towards the bridge and not over the strings in the playing area. Okay, what else do we have in here? We've got my trusty old Chromatic Tuner that has been all over the world with me, this Boss TU2, and I've actually got a couple of these. It's definitely due for replacement because it's so large, but you know, it lives in my case, and it's a great tuner if you're looking for one for double bass. Say it's probably a little bit outdated, a bit big now, but it does the job. I've also got a pair of black socks, because the amount of times you get to a gig and either you or somebody else has turned up wearing white socks, it's not a good look when you're wearing tuxedos. And also in my suit bag, I carry with me a spare bow tie. If you do a lot of, I don't know, big band gigs and that type of thing, which I often do, bow ties can go missing pretty easily, and it's worth having a spare. Another item that's really useful is this, which is a H2F Pre, which is a preamp made by F-Deck, and I use this actually generally only when I'm using a borrowed amplifier. So I don't tend to use it in conjunction with the acoustic image amp, but if I'm working with another amp, then this is great because it will give me a high pass filter and the impedance that's right for double bass as well. So they're worth having. I've also got a load of Allen keys in here for my bass guitar work, and lastly in this case a pair of earplugs, which I've had this set for ages. I always put them back in this case and put them back in my larger case in the same way because they're so easy to lose. But custom molded earplugs are expensive, so you know it pays, for if you're like me and you're forgetful, to put them back in the same place every time to try and stop you losing them. Let's have a look what else I've got with me that I really think that you should have as well. This bottom case here for my Euphonic Audio Wizzy Cab has got a couple of things in which I think that you should always make sure you have. Oh, here we are. Firstly, clothes pegs. If it's windy outside, these, you know, you can sell them for 10 bucks a time. You really need these if you're doing any kind of outdoor gigs, you know, background jazz music, whatever. It's great to have these to stop the wind. I've even used them on a stage where the singer had their own fan, which was a little distracting, but these got me through the gig. There's also an extension cable, and anybody who turns up to a gig who has an amplifier without an extension cable should not be allowed in the gig, because it's just so annoying when the guitar player rocks up and, oh, I haven't thought about it, I haven't bought an extension cable. You've got to have one. Make sure that you bring one with you to your gig so you're able to set up where you need to. And then, of course, the obvious kind of stuff, cables for your amplifier, and I always carry 2 sets of cables with me wherever I go. Just, you know, I've had them go down on a gig before, and I don't want it to happen again and not have a solution. Now, the rest of the stuff that's really useful I carry in my double bass case, but most of this is stuff that I don't need to just get hold of quickly. Let's have a look. Where are we? So I've got my case here, my trusty old double bass case, and in the top pocket, which is actually broken, I just keep with me a really old set of strings. And the great thing about this is that you're carrying with you a set of strings that don't matter if you knock them or you ding them. I wouldn't ever carry a fresh set of double bass strings because they're so expensive, but you have to have them within reach. I mean, I've never actually had a string break on a gig on a double bass, you know, but it happens, and it's likely that at some point in your career you'll need these, and it's no effort to shove these in. I mean, I must have put them in months ago. In fact, I've also just found an old tie from a gig, so there's my tie in case I'm looking for that later. But yeah, put them in here, forget about it, and you'll be really glad that they're there if you need them in future. And it's another good reason not to trim the ends of your strings when you're changing them, because they won't fray. They'll still be usable when you have to put them on in an emergency. Now, this pocket at the bottom, I've got kind of stuff that I don't need very often. So here's a spare rosin cloth in case I needed a cloth for the rosin. And usually this is tucked, or I have another one that's tucked on behind the tailpiece on my double bass. The other thing I have on my double bass, thinking off the top of my head, is a bow quiver, which I use the bow a fair amount. If you don't, you won't need one. Yeah, another cable for the amplifier. Now this is something that my American bass playing friends will know all about, a damp hit. And anybody who's in a country that has changing humidity will need to, you know, really have one of these. I use it very rarely, as in the UK we're pretty stable and you know, pretty much just always rains here, so we're okay. But I do sometimes do gigs in hotels or theatres that have really heavy air conditioning, and it's really warm on the stage, but you know, a different kind of humidity off stage. I might occasionally use them then, and it's certainly something that I'll carry for the odd occasion that it's needed. Here's something else that I don't use very often, but when I do need to use it, it's absolutely essential that I have it. And it's a Xerox, I think they're called, or Xeros, end pin anchor. So it goes from my stool and yeah, just stops the end pin slipping away from you. And if you're playing sat down, or you know, and you need one of these, you're really going to need it, because there are certain occasions, particularly for jazz bass players, where you know you might be working somewhere where they don't want you to use your end pin to jab into the floor and ruin their nice wooden flooring. Okay, what else have we got here? Spare pencils. Every musician should always have pencils with them if you're doing any gigs that involve sight reading and sheet music. So make sure that you've got a pencil, and preferably one with a rubber. So I always carry a few. The amount of times that you need them at gigs, you know, it's all over. It's, you know, such a frequent thing, isn't it? This spare rosin, it's so easy to lose your rosin. I just, you know, I don't use this old pot of pops anymore, I think it is. So I just put it in here in case I need it. I once did a gig with a violinist who lost his rosin, and he just had his bow reheard, and it was a bit of a nightmare for him. So, you know, it's well worth just carrying a spare in somewhere that you're not gonna notice. And I think that's all from the bass case. But I did also want to show you, lastly, my bow case, because there's one or two other bits in there which I think you need to be aware of that are worth carrying with you. So the bow case, because when I'm using the bow, I'm often not using an amplifier, so it's handy to have a tuner, and this tuner has a microphone. so I don't need to carry a separate lead to attach it to my pickup. So I have a separate tuner just for, you know, classical playing or acoustic playing. It's really useful to have that in here. Of course, a bow case itself is so important. Don't ever put your bow in the pocket on the soft case because it will ultimately get damaged at some point. Rosin, you know, really important obviously if you use a bow. What else have I got in here? Another pencil, so it's to hand. And lastly, really useful thing to have with you, a pair of nail scissors. Because if you get to the gig and your nails are a bit long, it's really irritating. And that should hopefully get you out of trouble and get you through the show. Well, I've just taken a look at my list of things that I wrote down earlier that you should have with you, and the last important ones are a music stand. And the reason I don't have my music stand here is that it lives in my car, so I can never forget it. And it's a large black conductor's music stand, something really stable, not one of those silly little fold-up ones that will break or not support the music. You want something meaty, especially if you're a jazz player using real books. So leave your music stand in your car so you can never forget it. That's a great tip. And also take a music stand light if you're doing any type of show or anything that involves sight reading in a theatre or what have you. I have a music stand light, which again lives in my car actually as well. Now, that's what I came up with today. What have I missed? I'm sure there's a ton of stuff, so please let me know. Join the conversation by leaving a comment, and I really appreciate you watching this lesson and any of the other ones you've seen on Discover Double Bass. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.